Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
As you'll know, Fighting on Film and Warfare Media partnered up to give our listeners a huge discount on high-quality Cold War posters. But now there's more. Warfare Media also offers clothing and the chance to order OP4 DPM camouflage uniforms. Support the podcast and use the code FOF20 at checkout for 20% off your order. Don't delay, visit warfaremedia.net today. Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film. This week we are thrilled to be joined by Max Birkett, a uniform supervisor and costumer. Max has worked on many war-related works, such as D-Day, The Unheard Tapes, Napoleon and The Crown, as well as the upcoming film Pressure that we're all looking forward to seeing, and Fuse. Max, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's very exciting.
Welcome.
This episode, guys, is an interview episode. Our Patreons put up some questions from Max. Do go and join the Patreon if you want to support us at FOF HQ and, get dibs on asking questions for guests. So my first question, Max, really is sort of to kick us off, is how did you get into doing the role that you're in?
So, there are various ways to get into costume or indeed the idea of being crew in general. I think I took a slightly more unconventional route. I was an extra or an SA supporting artist. On my first job with the casting agency, I turned up on The Crown Series 3 as a RAF pallbearer for Churchill's funeral. And I happened to know very well the chap doing the military costume. They needed some help. They were very snowed under, so offered a couple of days' work here and there because I was looking for work myself at the time, hence going on the agency's books. And the supervisor for the rest of the job just decided that wanted to keep me around for a few days, and then I was on the whole of that job and just kept the ball rolling from there. Really, I absolutely loved it from start to finish to present day.
Yeah, so a bit of a happy accident then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and I should tell the listeners, me and Max go back a long way. Me and Max were living history buddies back in the day. So, and Max has always been hot on his kit. So for him to be doing this makes complete sense. So Matt, I think you've got a Patreon question for us.
I do. We're going to kick off with one from Tom Cope, and he asks, do costumers also sit around and scream at the telly like we do when they spot something wrong?
Yes, in the short answer, yes, absolutely, we do. You'll find that a lot of costumers were probably critics themselves long before even getting into doing costumes. So yes, that absolutely tracks.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's quite heavily linked to reenactment, as Robbie said. Myself and Robbie both being reenactors back in the day. You will find it goes hand in hand, I think. It's the research, the level of attention to detail, the kit, uniforms, equipment, weapons, that kind of thing. It draws people to it. It gives them an understanding of how to research as well, or what thought process is needed for certain roles, certain equipment sets, that kind of thing. You look at Angels, one of the biggest costume houses in the UK. Their military department is, there's a few reenactors in there. It's the same sort of idea, the same thought process goes hand in hand. I was lucky enough to talk to Alex Fordham, who's a big military costumer himself, and to discover that he was a First World War collector was quite exciting, militaria. So I think, there's a lot of crossover with reenactment, with military vehicle owners, with military collectors. Yeah, it does go quite hand in hand.
You guys were World War One, am I right in that?
Yeah, we were First War. Yeah, that's what we did. I know Max, he'd go off and find some obscure thing and you'd be like, oh, great. You just know it was right.
It's quite interesting when, if you have an interest and you scream at the TV, as it says, you like to pick things out. It's also nice to put things in for people at the same time, which is something that I love doing because, people always say we're not making a documentary here. We're doing it for the majority of people, not the minority of nerds, for want of a better term. But I like putting things in for that specific reason because I'd like to see it myself. We'll point at the TV and see that thing that's really nice detail. I think one example I remember doing Scottish troops for VE Day, just a few guys in tam o' shanters, and the way that we positioned them right on the back of the head, exactly as per so many references of nonchalant soldiers wearing their headdress in a certain way that it's just so wartime. Civilian soldiers in wartime setting, in VE day, very relaxed, that exact style that people think is wrong. People would look at it with a modern head on and think that, that beret looks awful, but it is correct for the time period. And if you know what you're looking at, to look for those details. It can work both ways. You can also point at the TV for a good reason, for something that you like to see.
God knows there's plenty of terrible berets out there on shows and things, aren't there? But, it's always really nice to see something with a bit of authenticity to it. I mean, what you were saying there made me think, well, adding to, set dressing and costuming, mise en scène is just a really important part of making any project just feel that little bit more authentic and real. I find that anyway. We're always banging on about it on the show,
Oh, absolutely. I think building characters is what I love to do. Even if you're costuming 30, 40, 50 soldiers, if you're doing different uniforms, different regiments, you can look at the person, look at the medal ribbons, look at the way they're wearing something and their equipment. You can build a character, you can make that person look as if all these choices are his, not mine or anybody else's. You want it to be believable, and the same thing with principal cast, with actors. We want it to look like that they are the real deal. That's their choices that they've made to wear things in certain ways. The medal ribbons they wear tell a story. We create a character, and there's no reason you can't do it for background extras, artists as well. There's no reason you can't do that.
That's what I bang on about on the show. Is I often talk about characterization through clothing, because I think it's something that I'm coming from an acting background. The listeners will know, but it's something that it can be missed quite often, even down to something as simple as unzip your jacket just a tiny bit more. And that can say so much about a certain person or a character or what you're trying to portray. So all this sort of things like that, it's such a small detail, but it adds so much to the films that we watch and love. Let's move on to Brian Williams' question. And he asks, are there any examples where a film has thrown historical accuracy aside in costumes? If so, what's the worst film?
Well, that dovetails nicely.
But plenty, yes. I think I'll start by my personal experience of that question. My experience was Death on the Nile, which is a film we made, Agatha Christie film we made a few years ago. And it starts set in the First World War in 1918 with the Belgian army fighting the Germans. And there was a lot of meetings beforehand about, presenting mood boards with what the uniforms look like, what the weapon systems will be, what the equipment will look like, and they're sort of working it all out in their heads with their sort of director's eye on. And then they decided, after we presented the 1914, there was some debate whether it would be 1914 or 1918, two distinctly different years, start and finish of the war. Obviously, the equipment and uniform is very different. 1914, you've got red-coloured trousers, blue great coats, kepi hats, very different. 1918, steel helmets, everything's khaki, a lot has changed in those 4 years. So we presented this gas equipment, that kind of thing. They said, right, we're going to have a gas attack. Okay, that's going to really link you to 1918 if you have to choose, because 1915, first use of gas. And they said, okay, great, let's do that. We want the red trousers and the blue jackets. Like, okay, right, right. And they're, well, we're going to do it because it goes better with the actor's hair. The colour looks better. Right, okay. And yes, then they ended up shooting it in black and white, so it didn't really matter. That was my personal experience of thinking, okay.
Yeah.
But in general, and it's probably going to be fairly controversial because I think we grew up on a lot of films like The Battle of Britain, Longest Day, Bridge Too Far. It's not the historical accuracy in terms of costumes. It's not throwaway. It's more the interesting choice. In the case of Battle of Britain, the equipment was a lot more readily available. So there's no reason they couldn't have used the right flying helmets, the right Mae Wests, or at least made very cheap copies of the originals that existed. I think whether it was a budgetary decision at the time or whether the accuracy was more important than the costume, bearing in mind you had Adolf Galland and lots of other Battle of Britain pilots there to advise. Those choices are interesting when it was all available. Christopher Plummer's there wearing a 1960s Irving jacket copy rather than an original one, which you could have bought in, you could have magazine subscription, you could have written in and got one for £1 or so from this army surplus market. But that was the choice that was made at the time. But I suppose, the Battle of Britain, Band of Brothers and the Pacific are still the gold standard. I think look at the positivities of things and the flip side of things. Again, it's nice to see And I think it still holds up as what should be a very achievable target for a lot of shows. Should strive to have the accuracy that those shows really, really got. You know, they really got onto it in all respect. Obviously, it's not perfect. Of course, there's mistakes, but that level, attention to detail, and the attempts they made were really important, I think.
We talked about it a few weeks ago, how many HBTs were made for the Pacific. And I remember them flooding the Militaria market after, and it was really difficult for a while to discern if you bought a repro or if you bought a Pacific one, because there were so many of them. Do you find, though, with your job at the moment, is it easy, and as you mentioned, like buying something back in the 60s would have been £1 or something, do you find it easier now for, I assume you're part of a team and someone will be a purchaser of equipment. Do you find like it's easier now with companies such as like What Price Glory and things like that making the reproductions? Has that helped your profession?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, massively. I mean, all the hire houses that we will still probably hire from, I mean, purchasing is generally done for principal cast. Okay. So you can buy a repeat, you can get them all brand new, you can break them down, you can weather them, however you want to do it. You know, you've got 10 repeats of this uniform. So when we do an explosion or whatever, or there's blood work, that kind of thing, that's the jacket post-explosion, that kind of thing. You know, so purchases are generally done for cast members, but background generally higher, you know, for cost-effective reasons as well, and ease of storage, that kind of thing. So yeah, then costume houses will probably buy a lot of these reproductions in, or they'll have them made at certain times. They'll be knocking around from other shows. So yeah, there's a lot more. Yeah, having good quality reproductions on the market is hugely helpful. Yeah, absolutely.
No, massively, massively so.
That raises a question I've always wondered. We often talk about how films portray the passage of time, or situational change with weathering and wearing of costumes. Is that something that the costumer team does, or is that something that's worked on by another team, like the effects team, or who does that? I assume it's the costuming team. I would have thought, because they would have had the expertise.
So it's the breakdown department, which usually fall within a costume department. There's a small team. Depending on the size of the job, it can be a couple of people, it can be a whole big team. And then they'll be responsible for it. They'll have compounds, powders. They'll have all this stuff mixed up, ready to go for set days. With lots of crowd in, so be ready to mud up all the trousers, knees, that sort of thing, if they've been in the trenches. But cast uniforms, they'll go through the breakdown department if they're needed for a certain thing. They'll be approved and checked. But yeah, it's within the costume department. Yes, within that bubble, but sort of a subsection of it.
That's really interesting. I've got one again from Tom. Tom asks, has the change in the way films and TV are made, streaming services entering the market and lower budget TV, has that impacted how costuming is done? Also, the rise in easy access to information, meaning, is there a more demanding market?
That is interesting.
I guess that plays into the audience is a little bit more knowledgeable, so are they picking things out, do you think? Rivet counting?
Yes, I think it's true. I think it is. I mean, it's a difficult one to dissect, really, because while the internet is there and you've got a huge availability of resources there, it's also flooded with a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
And that is a huge problem in our jobs, really. I mean, one example I had was we're doing, it was in Afghanistan, so contemporary Afghanistan, set in 2011, I think, I want to say.
Okay.
And before I'd started, a week before, they'd put these mood boards together with all pictures of different uniforms and bits and bobs on there, as well as all the civilian stuff. And they were still in the room when I did the first fitting with the lead actor. And he started looking at the mood boards and saw a picture of guys wearing desert camouflage, but the early sort of like very early Iraq War desert DPM. And then Royal Marines wearing the sort of the DPM, the green and brown DPM jackets with the desert trousers. He looked at it like, let's do that. I like that. I want that. And I didn't put the mood board together. And obviously it's way off the time period. We're in 2011 where it's all MTP. Everything's changed, that year of change. So I had to explain to him very gently that we couldn't do that. And that it shouldn't have been on there in the first place, because they Google British Army soldier, Afghanistan, Iraq, and this is what you get.
That's what happens when you have a 10-15 year war, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I say it's quite difficult to wade through and find the information you need with all the sort of a lot of bad info out there.
I guess there's an element of the audience kind of like having a perception of what they think is authentic looking as well. Sometimes that's a good thing, a bad thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, it definitely can be.
How much time are you afforded to do a researching phase? How long would you get to do something like that? Is it like a week or a month or?
Right. So, I mean, most jobs start with a prep period.
Okay.
I mean, that can vary depending on the size of the job, the length of the job. I think because when I did The Crown, I think we had about six or 8 weeks of quite a long prep period. But I was prepping for the whole job from start to finish, the whole series. So that covered 10 episodes, each of which is sort of a film in itself. So it's a huge variety of uniforms going on throughout that period, throughout those episodes. But 6 to 8 weeks that's a great chunk of time to get stuck in, because you're covering your research in the first couple of weeks, just bare bones, just getting pictures together, archive images together, and then you've really got to work out where this equipment's coming from. Splitting it into your cast members, your background artists, so where you need to get it all from. Some things will have to be made, others will be hired, and you've got to think about turnaround times. So, the schedules will change all the time, but you'll have a rough idea of when this scene is going to be shot. So say you need to get this actor's uniform for this scene, needs to be finished and completed and fitted. Most importantly, it needs to be fitted and tested out long before the date. Something's gone seriously wrong if you're doing it so close to the knuckle. So you need to build in that time. So it can be quite a while, but you're not sometimes really fighting the turnaround time there.
Are you given a budget to work with there, or is it just literally, you have an idea of what you need and then that someone else is worrying about that part of it? Or are you consciously thinking, oh, well, we only have X amount of money, so I'm going to have to really think about what I have to look for?
Budgeting is quite difficult because it's all projected and you're projecting for the rest of the job, but you will have a budget to work to, absolutely.
Okay.
And that can be quite restricting. I mean, that does dictate where a lot of decisions get made. I mean, I did a job last year where we had to use reenactment groups as our background because there wasn't generally the budget to hire background, so extras for the duration. So reenactors, we had to get them, because obviously you hire a reenactment group, you get all the gear, you get the guys turned up because it's their bread and butter. It's what they do on the weekends. They might bring vehicles and all sorts. You get it's a package deal. But if we hire SAs, we have to pay them, hire the uniforms, and then hire them for the fittings. So we get the guys in, we pay them for the fittings. There's a lot more cost involved in that.
And then I guess that's like a double-edged sword where you've hired a load of people who know everything as well. So it could be harder for, if the lead's in something that's wrong. I remember an anecdote you told me years ago, and there was something about gas brassards, and you were an SA on a show, and you were like, well, he shouldn't be wearing that because it's wrong for the period or something. And, I can imagine that could be quite difficult if you've got a bunch of reenactment lads going, well, the lead's in, he's in a 1948 pattern battle dress jacket and we went to be 1939. Like, I could imagine it's like a bit of a tough thing.
It is, as you say, very much a double-edged sword, because the good reenactment groups absolutely work with you. They understand the assignment, for want of a better expression. They know the drill, and others not so good. It can create more work, and I think it's difficult, because I've been on both sides of that, to be respectful, because obviously they do know their stuff, but there are also times where it's been the flip side of it as well, where I think we've had to correct them on certain things. But it does work both ways, very much so. And the quality of reenactment groups will very much determine how smooth the whole thing goes. There's some great ones out there.
Our next question comes from Gonville Bromhead, who we've been wondering who is that on our Patreon for a while, and this question answered it, so it's quite nice. He asks, well, obviously, historical accuracy is important. What are the other factors when it comes to costuming that need to be factored in, especially those of us, myself included, who may occasionally shout at the screen when they notice an attached collar or stable belts over service dress, etc., may not consider. Also, really happy to hear this is what Max is doing. Sounds right up his street. Pass on my best wishes, Stephen Cobden.
Hello, Cobden. Lovely to hear from you. There's a lot of different factors there. There is, absolutely. I think first off the bat, there is a costume designer, and it's fairly rare, I suppose, on a military job that costume designers will be from a military costume background. It's quite normal. They'll be average costumers that not average, I mean good, normal costumers that do civilian costume on the day to day, and military is something that's just happened to have fallen in their lap. They've chosen to do this job. It's a bit unusual, so they need guiding hands to help them with the bare bones, but they don't have to choose to listen to any of that information. They have total freedom of choice. They can, if they want a certain actor to wear something to mark him out as unusual, that's something that they tend to do. So it's working out a good balance between something that's historically accurate, but also the designer wants it to be unusual. So, for example, we ended up putting an assault jerkin for a D-Day scene on one of the officers to mark him out as the officer. It was one of those things we had to sort of toe the line between it being accurate and marking him out as unusual. So that is something that does play a part. Designers can take it or leave it very much. I mean, as Paul Biddis, I think, said on one of your other episodes, it's not our train set. It's somebody else's pulling the strings, and absolutely we do what we can to keep it as accurate and do our jobs, but at the same time, there's a lot of other people doing theirs. So, it's working with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing, it does always end up costing more generally. Things like clearance of badges for legal reasons is quite important. A lot of the time we can't use real designs. So we have to have things made up, suitably changed. We have to submit like cat badges that can sometimes have to be redesigned and sent through a clearance company. So they'll send them off and get them checked for legal compliance. So sometimes we have to completely change things. On the Crown, we had to do the Hong Kong handover for 1999, and the Chinese military uniforms, Army, Navy, and Air Force. I mean, we got the colours right. We made the cut of the uniform was exactly bob on, but all the insignia was total rubbish. We had to get it made up and so far removed from reality because legally we weren't allowed to use it. I mean, there's also things like stuntmen as well. There's something you might pick out on the TV and point at. Something might look a bit odd. And that's because they will have a lot of equipment, might be water bottles will be swapped out to be rubber ones.
Like harnesses or something. Yeah.
Collars will be worn open rather than done up as they should be because they need to be able to move and they need to be breathed properly. There might be a soft hat option as opposed to a helmet. It's all for the stunt, something that might look really odd on screen, but it's towing the line. It has to be so that they're safe.
Hello there, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to let you know that you can now join our supporting cast over on Patreon. As thanks for your support, you'll be able to help us pick films, submit questions for guests, have first pick on brand new and exclusive merch, and much more. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
What's the biggest challenge for you as a costumer or when you're uniform supervisor? What's the biggest challenge on a set for you personally?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's trying to sit back and accept things for what they are. That if you can only work with the budget you've got, with the time you've got, and sometimes I think I personally I do it where I am one of these people that points at the screen myself, and I will exactly the same as everyone else out there. So if I've got something wrong for whatever reason, it could be a simple mistake, it might be a budgetary thing, we couldn't afford the right one, there wasn't enough of these to go around, we couldn't get enough. I take that to heart. I struggle to stand back and just accept that for what it is. So I always strive to do the best that you can do, and that's quite difficult.
Do you have a favorite bit of characterization through costume that you've been able to slip into a production? Obviously the costume designer has the say on the main characters, and you get to outfit everyone but mostly the supporting cast and such. Is there one that stands out on any of the productions you've worked on?
So there was one particular one. We were doing the Royal Engineers in Kosovo in 1999, and it was such a random one to do. And I thought, okay, that is a really odd one. And it was Tony Blair visiting Kosovo.
Right.
We were seeing particularly Royal Engineers, specifically those guys, and they were waiting around. They're all in PLCE, DPM, berets, SA80 A1s. And looking at the picture, I thought, okay, that's pretty good, unusual. One of the guys came in for a fitting, and I said, "Oh, are you ex-military?" And he went, yeah. And I said, "Oh, what were you in, Royal Engineers?" I was like, "All right, we're doing Kosovo for this scene." He's like, "Yeah, I know, I was there." I was like, "What year were you there?" 1999. I was like, "Interesting, okay." So this fella, bless him, he came back in the week later because we'd had a good old chat. He brought his personal photo album from Pristina in 1999 with the Royal Engineers, the exact topic we were doing. I sat there for about half an hour with him going through all these photographs. We had his original K4 pass that was for getting in and out of the compound. We had this reproduced by graphics. It was put on the ID, the lanyard, worn, tucked in the pocket, exactly like the lads did. We spent a good week or two packing out all the equipment, getting it absolutely as nuts on as we possibly could. We sent them a few pictures, for sign off. I thought, this is fantastic. We couldn't have done it more accurately. We've got a real guy that was there checking every detail of it. We spent a good time putting these archives together, researching it, shot the whole thing, thought that is probably the most accurate detail I've put into anything I've ever done. It was just so close and all the details. And then they cut the scene.
Oh no.
Totally gone. You'd never even know it was there.
Did it ever get put out anywhere as like a deleted scene or anything?
Sadly, no. That one is on the dressing room floor. And it just sounded so daft because the uniforms were very obtainable. It was a very, it wasn't a particularly sexy subject, but I don't know anyone. I've never seen anyone do Kosovo. It's a kind of forgotten period of the British Army, and I found it so interesting because there's so many veterans out there that were there. Kosovo, Bosnia, all these sort of 90s conflicts and deployments that they don't get any representation, and we were there doing it. I was like, this is fantastic. And then it was gone, just like that.
I guess it's the pitfall of the job. You're not the editor, you're not the director, you're not the studio head who has that control. I guess that's really irritating as well. But then I guess at the end of the day, you're still doing your job and you got paid. So it's not all bad.
I do it for myself as well. I think as if a lot of us would say the same. Like we get the satisfaction out of doing the best job we can, whether it gets on camera or not. It doesn't matter. We know we've done the job.
You have that referencing from the bit that you did on the Crown show. So if it ever comes up again, you have that in your locker for your repertoire next time it comes on. So I guess it's still a good thing to have done because you still have that in your locker.
Yeah, it's all experience. It's all in the bank. The reference books I bought for various things, they're all still there on the shelf, waiting for the next one. You never know.
Matt, I think you have another Patreon question.
Well, you've already kind of answered this one from Paul Burns. He asks, I'm presuming there is always a budget for costume design on any set. How hard is it to stay within that?
It is difficult. It does really only come from practice, I think. You have to eventually understand the cost of hiring, particularly hire houses, have it in your head roughly how much it will cost to do a certain thing. But things always end up costing more than you think, always.
What kind of things lead to overruns?
Medals, in my experience, are the biggest one.
Okay. Right.
Putting together medal combinations, full-size, miniature, it doesn't matter. They cost a lot.
Right.
And you can do it incredibly cheaply, which I've had to do when the budget isn't there, which is assemble them myself. I mean, I've had medal bars and medal racks made up with 5-penny pieces with a bit of coloured printed out ribbon before. It's been done all glued together, all jammed on people's breasts with a safety pin. It's been done.
We're all going to be pausing shows now, looking out for 5p pieces and 2p pieces.
Yeah, spot the Queen's head on the 5p. but no, you can go one extreme to the other. That's the one extreme. The other is professional medal services, principal cast, getting them made. It costs hundreds. We've had to get medals and orders from as far flung as Australia. Where certain things just aren't made. I mean, orders, particularly, British orders, things that just aren't manufactured because they're made one-offs for the individuals. There's not many copies out there.
Yeah, I suppose
and what copies are out there cost a lot of money. So things like that always overrun. And those costume designers that don't generally do a lot of military tend to underestimate the cost of things like that. Badges, they cost a lot of money. They do, and especially when you factor in equipment, helmets for field gear, all that kind of stuff. It does add up. It really does. I mean, you can cheat things for background, but end of the day, it's expensive.
Max has a massive military collection, incredible. I don't know if he still has some of the stuff, but I remember being a kid and I'd go around his house and it was just reams of stuff, amazing. On a shoot, though, have you ever snuck in a personal item of yours into a show? Have you ever tried to do that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the best example I have is my good friend Callum, who I was working on the Crown with, doing the military together. He was out in Spain and we were filming 1946 British Army in Egypt. And there was a scene where soldiers playing football, so they're in PT vests, they're in shorts, plimsolls, and he was in the back of shot wearing khaki drills, but he was wearing his own souvenir belt, an original souvenir belt put together, or hate belt as some modern term would be, the hate belt full of badges, all these original items. It's a lovely, really unique thing. really unique thing, and that snuck it into shot.
Lovely.
Whether it stayed there or not, I couldn't say, but it was certainly was there, and it looked great.
It might be a bit intrusive. What's the pay like for you guys? Because we always wonder on the show, you know, you see the directors are making millions, you know, the leads are making hundreds of thousands, whatever it is. But as you go down, you know, what's the pay structure like for you guys? Because we always say on the show, it's really important when you watch a film to realize the sheer amount of effort and people that have worked on this, whether you go, you know, like you're doing a daily on the, you know, the burger van for everyone, you know, or you're doing costuming. So do you guys get paid okay? Like what's that like?
So it does vary, obviously with the job itself, with the budget overall, and yeah, every job is different. But generally, it depends. I mean, obviously, the process of going in a costume department, you would start as a trainee, which is the base level of joining. You might be a trainee for a year or two. It does vary depending on how many jobs you do, length of them, etc. And then you become a junior rate costumer, and you maybe spend a couple more years at that level, then a full rate costumer. And then if you're doing principal cast, looking after principal cast, that can generally pay a little bit better. Then you have your sort of supervisory roles, or so you'd be a crowd supervisor, supervising the extras on mass, or principals. You know, you might be supervising that process. So yeah, there's lots of tiers of it. But generally, I mean, your average costumer that's working on the floor is sometimes, I mean, the rates are pretty good for SAs, for extras now. They're probably earning about the same rate these days. But generally, it does vary, yeah. It does vary depending on the pay scale of the experience level as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a movie from sort of the annals of war history movies, war movies that you're a fan of that you think, oh, I'd love to have worked on that, you know, in terms of budget or topic or something?
Oh, that's a very good question. That I think if I said an answer, I'd probably kick myself later for not changing it to something else. Obviously, my favourite war films can be. There's a few of them that are a matter of life and death, and The Way Ahead. You know, a lot of the wartime ones that would have just been fantastic to work on for a huge amount of reasons. But I'd still love to do a Vietnam War film or series. Okay. That's one that I'd love to have off the list. I really would love to do something like that. But yeah, one day.
Hopefully.
You mentioned there briefly the progression that you can move through in your area of production side of things. Where does that end? Does that end with like head of the department? Does it end with like costume designer, like the lead of that? Costume design, I think, is a little bit more of a different sort of kind of spin off from like a costumer, though, isn't it? Where it's more perhaps has more of a design background. I don't know.
Yeah, so the costume designer is generally the head honcho of any department, but they'll obviously be concerned with the overall design of the costume. So they'll be all over the general aesthetic of crowd. So they generally won't get into the nitty gritty of what a crowd looks like. They'll sort of want to add certain colours in or certain looks. But with the principal cast, that'll be their bread and butter. They'll be all over that. So they'll be across the general design of the show or film. The department's generally run by the costume supervisor, who will be reporting to the designer and trying to make that vision possible and facilitating all of that. And then it will flow generally down there to crowd supervisors and other departments underneath that will, again, it will flow in a pyramid and generally get the whole job done, really. But yeah, the designer is calling the shots. They might not be very involved in the day-to-day sometimes, but they have to be everywhere, really, and have a hand in everything. It's very busy people, very busy people.
That's fascinating. Is there a lot of overlap with the other sort of, production departments, like props, special effects, that kind of thing? Because you mentioned working with the stunt guys, and you mentioned having to mock up like the medal racks and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know those departments work in pretty much the same way. Certainly hair and makeup will be very similar structure to costume. But I mean, having a good relationship with those other departments is key. Absolutely. And I've had it backfire a few times on me before. You know, you might be turning up to a certain day, and if you've not checked what weapon systems are down to be brought to that day, if you've not rung the armourers or sent them an email or checked what they're bringing, it can have bad consequences. Because if you're doing field gear, you know, you've got guys in the field and you're giving them grand belts or something, and then they're all issued with Thompsons, you're in trouble. You know, the idea is you need to be able to liaise with them and have that relationship where you can ring them up and say, oh, what weapons are you bringing? How many Thompsons? How many pistols? You know, we've got pistol holsters on 5 of the guys. So can you bring, I don't know, let's say eight rubber pistols, and then we'll work it out on the day, that sort of thing. It's covering the bases. The armourers will bring dummy magazines, things like that, en blanc clips for rifles and stripper clips, whatnot. It's ensuring that you've got everything you need there and working it together, because everyone wants the end result to look as good as it can do.
Yeah.
And that only comes through communication, which can be unfortunately quite poor. You've got to, especially, advisory roles as well. You've got military advisors on set. You need to have a good working relationship with them. Everyone wants it to be right.
I suppose once production's rolling, the tempo makes that communication difficult. Emails can be missed. You might not be able to reach someone.
Absolutely.
So, trying to get that integration of the character must be quite difficult, because you could really have a nightmare where you got like someone with a 1980s haircut in a 1940s jacket with a 1920s weapon system. You could have a real nightmare, and it's very unlikely due to the levels of professionalism, obviously. But I'm sure there's a sliding scale of that kind of issue that could come up.
Yeah, there's no shortage of sort of low budget military films on Netflix and all sorts. And The Last Drop is one that instantly comes to mind as being absolutely awful. I saw an advert for something on Netflix the other day. I think it was supposing to be something about the BEF in 1940 and the Battle for France, and there was GIs running on the cover and Sherman tank in the background, and it's this sort of like what used to be like Woolworths rack of DVDs, that kind of thing, and they're always poor and they're always cheap. So there's no shortage of things like that, but generally, working together to get the end result is what we do.
Do you find the level of kit and stuff within the industry at the moment, do you think that's as high as it's ever been, or do you think there's still room for improvement, or is it something that's sort of embryonic and always improving, or do you feel like now we're in a good era? I guess that would probably come down to budget of a movie or a show, maybe.
Yeah, certainly we are in a good position now. One company that we use a lot in Poland, they've supplied uniforms for 1917, Warhorse, Napoleon, Gladiator. I like to think of them as Weatherspoons of costume, really, for the military side of things, because their quality it's fine. It's good. By and large, it's okay. You can get an army of thousands cast and made through this company. They're never fantastic. You might want to put a bit more attention to detail, or send a few more emails, have a few more conversations with them about cast and certain uniforms and things for cast. But by and large, your average crowd guys will be nicely equipped. And they're good value for money. They can manufacture and 3D print these uniforms out, for want of a better expression. They can get them gone, and that really has helped. Those uniforms they made for Warhorse all those years ago, they've been reused on all countless other First World War films. And I've got a set myself from the company. They're really good stuff. It makes a good impression on screen, and I think that quality they're turning their hand to anything, provided you send them as many references as you can, be as explicit with the details. I know costumers that have gone over to the factory and basically stood over them and got in their way with all these notes and things like that. But generally, the more involvement you have, the better the quality product will be.
Makes sense.
Yeah, some good companies out there for sure.
Have you ever had any interesting requests from named actors or lead actors? You don't have to say any names, but maybe the battle dress was a bit itchy, or maybe the boots were a bit uncomfortable. Have you ever had any interesting things about costuming there, or sort of like personal preference things or something?
Not so much in the uniform side of things, though I did have an actor discreetly asked me to do a repair on their leather trousers that they were taking to a bondage party.
Oh, wow.
Not quite uniforms, though. So,
no. Okay, fair enough. And I wondered if, someone would have been like, oh, I'm not going to wear a proper undershirt. I'll just have a t-shirt on underneath or something, like things like that, to maybe make it more comfortable if an actor probably wasn't versed in wearing the uniform. Would you find that because they're obviously, it's acting, it's a vocation, they're okay with that? Or do you sometimes have to go, look, this is how it's worn, it's like meant to be this way, perhaps? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you'll find out quite quickly what the actor's outlook with that sort of thing will be. There will be some that will be very, very focused, very method, and will want to just do exactly as it should be. Some people can take it too far, I'm sure, with the Shia LaBeouf and Fury stories that were flying around. But generally, we love to see it. it's what we do. We want them to really get involved, and others that are perhaps not so used to it, but will nonetheless fill the role very well. So we facilitate. We put extra linings in things that are discreet. Just make that a little bit more accessible for them to get into the character without sort of scratching every 5 minutes, which is some of the uniforms.
I mean, you mentioned there that you make some alterations to things. Are there any kind of industry secret things that you guys do to the costuming? Are there are you the sort of people that will be sewing in blood packs for squibs and that kind of thing? Is that the kind of thing that costumers do?
Yeah, it comes back to the liaising with departments. So yeah, a job I did last year that involved big shootouts and squib scenes with stunt guys. That was very much working with SFX to get together and work out how these things are going to work. You might obviously a good idea to try it all out first. So we'll give them a shirt to try out. They'll try the blood pack on it. We'll stitch it on for them, or we'll make some packs up so they can attach, or vice versa. They might do it for us. There's no reason why it doesn't work the other way around. And you work together to figure out it's problem solving. It's creative problem solving, but it's always better to try it out beforehand. Always having these experiments, these liaisons. Again, that only comes with good communication and prep time, which it isn't always there. It isn't, but we like to. We hope it is.
Fascinating.
Me and Matt always talk about, because we do historical airsofting and I've done reenactment. So you find out that sort of the genuine resilience of uniforms and equipment throughout the years can be quite astonishing. Have you ever found, like, when you're on a shoot, like, the FX team might go, that jacket just won't rip at the seams like we want it to on an explosion shot because it's just so resilient? Have you ever come across anything like that when you've been working? Yeah,
I mean, we have to cut a lot of uniforms to give the effect that we want it to, with blown out patches and things like that. Generally they don't just tear apart. It is quite difficult to you have to make them as accurate as possible, but sometimes they don't go.
Well, my final question for you, Max, is what's the favorite production that you've worked on so far?
I think I have to say The Crown. The pure and simple fact that I think I did series 3 many years ago, 5 and 6 a few years back, and it became so familiar to me. I really enjoyed it. It felt like home working on that show. I had a great time, great crew. The budget was good, so I was able to really do the best job I could do. And it's one of those jobs that no matter how many years go by, I'll still look at it. And I got my first break in costume working on that series through a friend of mine. So it's always one that I'll come back to with a great feeling, and I have a great sense of accomplishment by what, you wouldn't know that there was quite so much military in it. A lot of it's been cut. It's very downplayed. You won't see a hell of a lot, but I know we did it as a team. We did our all on it.
Yeah, the unsung heroes. That's what we talk about every week on the show. We say all the people behind the scenes, are the people that make these movies enjoyable, and the reason you can watch them, and the fact that they even get made at all is a miracle, with everything that has to go into it. So Max, this has been an absolutely incredible episode. Fascinating. We've been wanting to get someone on who knows the kit and equipment for years. And thanks for coming on. And it was your first ever podcast, so I mean, you've done exceptionally well. And you're welcome back anytime. And all that's left to say is thank you for joining us. No, thank you very much for having me. It's been fantastic. It's been incredible.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant insights, Max. Thank you so much for joining us. As Rob said, been looking forward to having a chat about this for quite a while, because it's, some of the intricacies of the production side of things are just completely forgotten about. When we're sat there watching a movie and it's on the big screen in front of us and we just take it in as it's presented, we don't always think about the hard work that goes in behind the scenes. And it just leaves it for me to say, if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. You can support the show via Patreon, and you can get your questions into people like Max when we have them on, which is a really great way of supporting the show. Thank you very much for listening.
And we'll catch you next week, guys, for more Fighting on Film. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.